the eyes beneath. Every night, the scratching sounds came, persistent as a heartbeat. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, the rhythmic clawing beneath the floorboards of my old Victorian house setting my nerves on edge. It was a sound that seemed to speak, to whisper secrets meant only for the dark. I had moved into the house only a month ago, drawn by its isolation and the promise of peace it offered. But peace was the last thing I found. The scratching began the first night, a soft, insistent noise that I had dismissed as the house settling. But as the nights passed, the sound grew louder, more desperate. I told myself it was just some animal that had found its way under the house. Yet, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. One night, driven to the brink of madness, I decided to confront whatever it was. Armed with a flashlight and a crowbar, I pried open the floorboards, the noise growing louder with each plank I removed. The hollow space beneath was dark, a void that seemed to breathe. And then I saw them, two cold, dead eyes staring back at me from the dirt. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the eyes followed my every move. They were human, I was sure of it, but they belonged to no living soul. I covered them again, hammering the floorboards back into place, but the image of those eyes was seared into my mind. The next day, I researched the house's history and discovered a chilling tale. A century ago, a young woman had vanished without a trace, her disappearance attributed to the vast woods surrounding the property. But locals whispered of a darker fate, of a husband's rage and a secret buried beneath the floor. As dusk fell, I heard it again, the scratching. But this time, it was accompanied by a voice, a soft, feminine whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Look deeper," it urged. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The eyes haunted my dreams. Their cold gaze followed me wherever I went, even in the daylight. I became obsessed, consumed by the need to uncover the truth. The whispers grew louder, urging me to look deeper. But how could I? The floorboards were sealed, and the dirt beneath held its secrets well. I spent my days researching the woman who had vanished, a young bride named Evelyn. Her husband, Henry, had been a recluse, rarely seen outside the house. Neighbors spoke of strange lights flickering in the windows at night, of eerie cries carried by the wind. And then there were the rumors, the ones that sent shivers down my spine. Henry had been a man of science, dabbling in the occult. He had claimed to communicate with the dead, to bridge the gap between this world and the next. But his experiments had gone horribly wrong, and Evelyn had paid the price. The townspeople whispered that he had trapped her soul beneath the floor, that her eyes were the only remnants of her existence. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Armed with a shovel, I returned to the bedroom. The scratching had become a constant companion, a symphony of dread. I dug, my hands blistering, until the earth gave way. And there, in the darkness, I found her, a skeletal hand reaching for the surface. Evelyn's eyes were empty sockets, but they bore into mine with a hunger that chilled my soul. She had been trapped for a century, her anger festering, her desire for revenge consuming her. I tried to pull her free, but the roots held her fast. The whispers turned to screams, and the room filled with a malevolent energy. As I struggled, the walls seemed to close in. The air grew thick, and I could barely breathe. And then, in a final act of desperation, I severed the roots. Evelyn rose, her form ethereal, her eyes burning with rage. She pointed toward the window, and I understood, I had to set her free. But as I lifted the sash, the room shook, the walls cracking. The house itself seemed to rebel, as if it knew the consequences of releasing her. And then, with a deafening roar, the floor collapsed, swallowing me whole. I awoke in darkness, my body aching, the scent of damp earth filling my nostrils. The floor had given way, plunging me into a hidden chamber beneath the house. The air was thick, suffocating, and I struggled to my feet. The walls were lined with roots, their gnarled fingers reaching toward me like long hands. Evelyn stood before me, her form flickering. Her eyes were no longer empty, they blazed with a hunger that defied death. "You freed me," she whispered, her voice echoing through the chamber. "But freedom comes at a cost. What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The room seemed to close in, the walls pulsing with a malevolent energy. "Revenge," she hissed. "A century of torment demands retribution." She pointed to the roots, their tendrils wrapped around her ankles. "These are my chains. Break them, and I will grant you a boon." I hesitated. What could she offer? But then I remembered the whispers, the ones that had driven me to madness. "What do you need?" Her laughter was hollow. "A vessel," she said. "A living host to carry my rage. In return, I will grant you power beyond imagination." I glanced at the roots, their grip unyielding. "And if I refuse?" "Then you will join me," she said. "Bound to this place for eternity." I had no choice. I reached for the crowbar, its metal cold against my skin. With each blow, the roots splintered, and Evelyn screamed. The room trembled, the walls cracking. And then, as the last root snapped, she collapsed, her form dissipating like smoke. The chamber shook, the ceiling crumbling. I stumbled toward the exit, the world spinning. But as I climbed back into my bedroom, I knew I was changed. The whispers were gone, replaced by a voice, the same one that had urged me to look deeper. And so, I write this, my hands shaking, my eyes burning. I am no longer alone. Evelyn lives within me, her rage my own. The scratching continues, but now it comes from within. And when I lift the floorboards, I see her eyes, cold, dead, and hungry. The house creaks, the walls shifting. I know what she wants, to be set free, to walk this world once more. But I am bound by an unseen pact. And so, I wait, my heart pounding, for the next victim to cross my threshold. Hey! Subscribe for more scary stories. Story 2. The Gaze Unseen. I always thought there was something off about the mannequins in Mr. Penumbra's boutique. Their poses too lifelike, their painted smiles too knowing. I worked across the street, and every evening as I locked up, I felt their eyes on me, cold and unyielding. But last night, something changed. As the streetlights flickered to life, I saw it, the slightest twitch in the mannequin closest to the glass, a finger moving, beckoning. I shook my head, blaming the long hours and lack of sleep. But as I turned to leave, a chill ran down my spine. There, reflected in the window, was a figure draped in shadow, its outline blurred but unmistakably human. I spun around, but the sidewalk was empty, only the whisper of leaves skittering across the concrete. The next morning, I found myself drawn to the boutique. The mannequins were as still as ever, but one stood closer to the window than I remembered. Its eyes, once dull and lifeless, seemed to hold a glint of something sentient. I leaned in, inspecting the figure, when I noticed a small note tucked in its hand. "Watch," it read, in spidery, uneven script. I spent the day wrestling with curiosity and dread. As dusk approached, I couldn't resist the urge to return. I watched, hidden by the shadows, as the street emptied and the world quieted. That's when I heard it, a soft creak, like the bending of old wood, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass tapping glass. I held my breath, peering through the darkness. The mannequins were moving, ever so slightly, their limbs shifting with eerie grace. But it was their eyes that held me captive, reflecting the moonlight with an unnatural sheen. They were alive, I was sure of it, and they were watching me. As I backed away, my heart pounding, I stumbled over something solid. It was another mannequin, this one lying on the ground, its face turned towards the sky, eyes empty. But it wasn't there before. I looked up just in time to see the boutique door creak open, a sliver of light cutting through the night. I should have run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. A figure emerged from the light, its movements jerky and unnatural. It was one of them, stepping out into the world of flesh and blood. And as it turned its head, I saw it, the same empty gaze that had haunted me from the window pane. The mannequin stepped onto the sidewalk, its plastic joints creaking like ancient bones. Its eyes bore into mine, and I felt a chill that reached beyond my skin. "You've seen us," it whispered, its voice a hollow echo. "Now you must join us." I stumbled backward, my mind racing. Join them? What did that mean? But before I could react, the other mannequins stirred. They emerged from the boutique, their movements synchronized, like a macabre dance. Their painted lips curved into smiles, and they surrounded me, closing the gap between us. "Look," one of them said, pointing to the moon. I followed its gaze, and there, etched against the night sky, was a constellation I'd never seen before. It resembled a twisted hand, fingers reaching out, beckoning. "The veil," the mannequin continued. "It's thin tonight. We can cross." I shook my head, my breath shallow. "Cross where?" The mannequins leaned in, their eyes glowing. "To the other side," they murmured. "Where we belong. Where you belong." I glanced back at the boutique. The window pane was no longer a barrier, it was a portal. The glass rippled, revealing a world of shadows and whispers. I had a choice: stay in the mundane reality I knew or step through into something unknown, something terrifying. But then I remembered the note, the one that had appeared in the mannequin's hand. Watch. Was this what it meant? To witness the crossing? To become part of their eerie existence? As the mannequins closed in, I made my decision. I stepped toward the window pane, my reflection wavering. The glass yielded, and I felt the pull, the inexorable force drawing me toward the veil. The mannequins followed, their fingers brushing my skin, their eyes urging me forward. And just as I stepped through, the world shifted. Reality fractured, and I glimpsed the other side, a realm of half-formed memories, forgotten dreams, and lost souls. The mannequins surrounded me, their plastic hands merging with mine. Together, we crossed into the abyss. The other side was a fractured reality, a place where memories bled into nightmares. I stumbled through the veil, my senses assaulted by whispers that seemed to come from within my own mind. The mannequins surrounded me, their plastic forms flickering like candle flames. They guided me deeper, toward the heart of this spectral realm. "Welcome," they murmured, their voices overlapping. "You've glimpsed the truth, the thin line between worlds. But now, you must choose." Choose? What was left to decide? I was already here, my existence teetering on the edge of something beyond comprehension. The mannequins led me to a desolate street, its cobblestones worn and uneven. Shadows clung to the walls, and the air tasted of decay. "Look," one of them said, pointing to a distant figure. It was a man, hunched and frail, his face obscured by a tattered hood. "The keeper," the mannequin whispered. "He guards the way." The keeper turned toward us, and I saw his eyes, empty, like the mannequin's. He raised a hand, beckoning. "Come," he rasped. "Cross the veil, and you'll find what you seek." "What do I seek?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The mannequins shifted, their gazes fixed on me. "Answers," they replied. "Answers to questions you haven't yet asked." I stepped closer to the keeper, my heart pounding. "What's on the other side?" He smiled, a ghastly grin that revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Truth," he said. "The truth about your reflection, your existence." The mannequins, they're more than mere figures. They're vessels, conduits for lost souls. Lost souls? My mind reeled. Why me? The keeper leaned in, his breath cold against my cheek. "Because you see," he whispered. "You see beyond the surface. You've glimpsed the veil, and now it calls to you." I looked back at the mannequins, their eyes pleading, their forms flickering. "What happens if I cross?" The keeper's laughter echoed through the empty street. "You become one of us," he said. "A guardian of the in-between. Forever watching, forever waiting." I hesitated. The mannequins reached for me, their plastic fingers brushing my skin. "Choose," they urged. "Choose before the veil closes." And so, with a final glance at the mundane world I'd left behind, I stepped forward. The veil enveloped me, its tendrils pulling me into the unknown. The mannequins followed, their eyes glowing brighter, their forms merging with mine. Now, I am both, part flesh, part plastic, part memory. I watched from the boutique window, my gaze fixed on the street. And when someone passes by, I reach out, my fingers brushing the glass. "Watch," I whisper, hoping they'll see, hoping they'll glimpse the truth. But most walk on, oblivious to the mannequins and the veil. They see only reflections, empty eyes staring back. And so, I wait for the one who will look deeper, who will cross over, who will join us in this eternal dance of shadows. Story 3. The Strand. I always prided myself on my meticulous nature, especially when it came to my home. Everything had a place, and there was a place for everything. That's why the first strand of hair in my soup was so jarring. It was long, much longer than mine, and as black as the void it seemed to mock me from. I live alone, have for years, so the presence of this alien thread in my meal was as unsettling as a whisper in an empty room. Days passed, and the strands kept appearing. In my cereal, on my toast, even nestled in the ice cubes of my water. I scoured my home for an explanation, but found none. The locks were secure, the windows sealed. No sign of entry, no sign of life other than my own. Yet, the hairs kept appearing, each one a silent scream that something was deeply wrong. Then came the note, a slip of paper that turned my blood to ice. "You look so pretty when you eat." The handwriting was elegant, almost loving. It was placed under my dinner plate, a plate I had set on a table I had cleaned. There was no denying it now, I was not alone. But who, or what, was my unseen guest? The following nights were sleepless, every shadow a suspect, every creak a declaration of my not-so-solitude. I set up cameras, I left traps, but nothing and no one appeared. The hairs, however, remained my constant, unwanted companions at every meal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world held its breath for nightfall, I found something new. A photo, face down beside my fork. The image was of me, eating, unaware of the lens, the observer. On the back, another note, "I'm getting closer." Panic rooted me to the spot. My sanctuary had been breached, my privacy shattered. The hairs, the notes, the photo, they were breadcrumbs leading to an inevitable conclusion. I was being watched, studied, perhaps even adored from a distance so close it was suffocating. As I sit here now, writing this with trembling hands, I can't shake the feeling of eyes on me. The walls seem to whisper, the floors to shift. I'm no longer sure what's real and what's a product of my frayed nerves. But one thing is certain, tonight, I dine with a ghost, and it hungers for more than just my company. The hairs multiplied, each meal a macabre tapestry of black strands. I tried to ignore them, to pretend they were mere nuisances, but their presence gnawed at my sanity. The unseen diner reveled in my discomfort, leaving notes that taunted me like a predator playing with its prey. I became obsessed. My days were consumed by the search for answers. I scoured old newspapers, library archives, and the internet. Nothing. No unsolved mysteries, no missing persons, no ghostly tales that matched my predicament. The hairs defied logic, as if they were spun from the very fabric of the unknown. One evening, as I sat down to dinner, I noticed a change. The hairs were shorter, finer, almost delicate. And the note beneath my plate was different, "You're getting closer." The unseen diner's words echoed in my mind, a riddle wrapped in dread. I decided to confront my spectral guest. Armed with a kitchen knife, I sat at the table, waiting. The hairs appeared, as expected, but this time, I didn't recoil. I followed their trail, tracing them to the corner of the room. There, in the dim light, I saw her, a woman, translucent and ethereal, her eyes hollow pools of longing. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't answer, only stared at me with hunger. Her hair, once black as midnight, now glowed like moonlight. She reached out, her fingers grazing my cheek. Cold. So cold. And then she vanished, leaving behind a single strand, delicate as a spider's silk. The note changed again, I missed tasting. I understood. She was a ghost, bound to this place by some unfulfilled desire. But what did she want from me? Why had she chosen my home, my meals? I thought of the photo, the one of me eating, taken without my knowledge. Was she trapped in that moment, forever yearning for sustenance? I researched ancient rituals, desperate for a solution. The hairs kept coming, and with each one, the ghost grew more desperate. She whispered in my dreams, urging me to find a way to bridge the gap between our worlds. I was her lifeline, her connection to life's simple pleasures. And so, I devised a plan. I set the table with care, placed a mirror in front of the empty chair. As the clock struck midnight, I sat down, my heart pounding. The hairs appeared, but this time, they wove themselves into a crown for the unseen diner. I closed my eyes, whispered the incantation, and when I opened them, she was there. Not a wraith, but a woman, her eyes no longer hollow. She smiled, and I knew what she wanted. I picked up the knife, sliced my palm, and offered it to her. She drank, her lips brushing my skin. And then, she faded, leaving behind a single word etched on the mirror, "Thank you." But the hairs remain, a reminder of our pact. I am no longer alone, and my meals are shared with a ghost who hungers for life. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a glimpse of her, beautiful, tragic, and insatiable. The unseen diner became a fixture in my life. She no longer hid in the shadows, but sat across from me, her presence both comforting and unnerving. We shared meals like old friends, our conversations silent but profound. She never spoke, yet her eyes held stories, tragedies, regrets, and a hunger that transcended the grave. I learned her name, Evelyn. She had died in this very house, a century ago, her love unrequited, her soul bound by longing. She had been a seamstress, her nimble fingers weaving intricate patterns into fabric. But her greatest creation was her own despair, a tapestry of unfulfilled desires. "Why me?" I asked one night, as we sipped invisible wine. The hairs had become a part of our ritual, delicate threads connecting our worlds. "Why did you choose me?" Evelyn's gaze held mine. "Because you see me," she whispered. "You feel my absence, my ache. You're like a mirror, reflecting my hunger." I wanted to help her, to release her from this liminal existence. But how? The hairs had led me to her, but they offered no solution. I researched ancient texts, consulted mediums, and even tried to communicate with her through Morse code. But Evelyn remained trapped, her translucent form fading with each passing day. Then, one evening, she placed a lock of her hair in my palm. It was warm, alive. "For you," she said. "A token of our bond." I understood. The hairs were more than reminders, they were conduits. Evelyn needed life force, and I was her unwitting donor. But what would happen if I severed our connection? Would she vanish, or worse? The answer came during a storm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Evelyn's face. She was fading, her features blurring like an old photograph. "Help me," she pleaded. "I'm slipping away." I took the kitchen knife, the same one I'd used to offer my blood, and cut the strand. Evelyn gasped, her form solidifying. "Thank you," she whispered, her touch warm against my cheek. But the hairs kept coming, shorter now, finer. Evelyn's desperation grew. She whispered secrets in my ear, memories of lost love, of betrayal, of a promise unfulfilled. And then she revealed her final request, "Let me taste life one last time." I hesitated. What would it cost me? My own vitality? My sanity? But Evelyn's eyes held mine, and I knew I was her lifeline, her bridge to existence. I prepared a feast, a banquet fit for a ghost. The hairs wove themselves into a crown, and Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her eyes alight with anticipation. I sliced my palm, offered it to her. She drank, her lips brushing my skin. And as she did, I felt a surge of energy, a mingling of souls. Evelyn's form solidified, her beauty transcending time. She smiled, and I knew I had given her life, and in return, she had given me something more precious, release. As the clock struck midnight, Evelyn vanished, leaving behind a single note, "Bon appetit." And now, I sit alone, the hairs gone, the house silent. But sometimes, Just sometimes, I catch a glimpse of her, a phantom at the edge of my vision, her eyes filled with gratitude. I wonder if she watches me, if she still tastes life through my senses. And I wonder, when my time comes, will someone else take my place? Will they find strands of hair in their food, hidden notes beneath their plates? Will they become the unseen diner, bound by hunger and longing? Story 4. The Silent Laughter. I had always been skeptical about the supernatural. Ghosts, spirits, things that go bump in the night, they were just stories to me, nothing more. That was until I took the job at the old Victorian house on Maple Street. The family was wealthy, the pay was good, and the kids were, well, I never actually saw the kids. The parents warned me about the house's quirks. Doors would slam shut, lights would flicker, and sometimes, late at night, you could hear laughter, the kind of laughter that only innocent children possess. They said it was just the wind, or the house settling. But I wasn't so sure. My first night alone, I settled into the plush sofa with a book, trying to ignore the creaks and groans of the ancient home. Then, just as the clock chimed midnight, it started. Faint at first, then growing louder, the unmistakable sound of children laughing. It echoed through the halls, playful and joyous. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I mustered the courage to stand and follow the sound, moving down the dimly lit hallway. The laughter seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I checked the children's rooms, empty. The playroom, not a soul in sight. The laughter continued, bouncing off the walls, filling the space with eerie mirth. In desperation, I turned to the security system. The screens showed every corner of the house, but they were all empty. No children, no intruders, nothing that could explain the sounds that filled the air. Yet, there it was, clear as day through the speakers, the sound of children playing. I sat there, staring at the screens, listening to the laughter that had no source. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was I losing my grip on reality? Or was the house truly haunted? As the laughter reached a crescendo, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was very wrong here, and I was in the middle of it. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that was almost suffocating. I knew then that I had to uncover the truth behind these ghostly echoes, no matter how scared I was. The next night, I sat in the dimly lit living room, my eyes glued to the security screens. The clock ticked past midnight, and the air grew colder. The laughter began again, soft at first, like distant whispers. I strained to hear, my breath catching as the sound intensified. I followed the echoes down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The walls seemed to close in on me, their faded wallpaper peeling, revealing glimpses of the past. The laughter led me to the attic door, a heavy wooden portal that hadn't been opened in years. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the brass knob. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase. The laughter grew louder, pulling me upward. The attic was a maze of forgotten memories, dusty trunks, moth-eaten clothes, and old toys. But it was the antique mirror that caught my attention. Its ornate frame held secrets, and as I stared into its murky glass, I saw them, the children. They stood behind me, their faces obscured by shadows. Their laughter echoed, but their lips never moved. Their eyes held a sadness that chilled me to the bone. Who were they? Why were they trapped here? And why did they laugh? I searched the attic, desperate for answers. Old journals revealed snippets of the past, a family torn apart by tragedy, children lost too soon. The mirror seemed to pulse with energy, drawing me closer. I touched its surface, and the room spun. I was no longer in the attic, but standing in a sunlit garden. The children played, a boy and a girl, their laughter infectious. They chased butterflies, their giggles echoing through the air. But then darkness crept in, swallowing the garden. The children's laughter turned to screams, and I watched helplessly as they vanished, leaving only echoes behind. Back in the attic, I stumbled, disoriented. The mirror held their souls, trapped between worlds. They wanted something from me, but what? Their laughter had turned desperate, pleading. I vowed to uncover the truth, to free them from their spectral prison. As I descended the attic stairs, the laughter followed, growing louder, more insistent. The children were no longer playful, they were angry. They wanted release, and they would stop at nothing to get it. But what could I do? How could I break the curse that bound them? I returned to the security screens, watching the empty rooms. The laughter now echoed through the walls, vibrating the very foundation of the house. I knew I had to confront the mirror, to face whatever lay beyond. But as I stood before it, my reflection distorted, I hesitated. The children's laughter surrounded me, drowning out my fear. The mirror consumed my thoughts. Its antique frame held secrets, and I couldn't escape its pull. Each night, I stood before it, staring into the murky glass, hoping for answers. The children's laughter had become my obsession, their spectral giggles haunting my dreams. I researched the house's history, digging through old newspapers and dusty archives. The children, Evelyn and Samuel, had lived here a century ago. Their parents had died tragically, leaving them orphaned. The house became their sanctuary, their playground. But something went wrong. A darkness seeped into the walls, twisting their innocent laughter into something malevolent. I found an old photograph, sepia-toned and faded. Evelyn and Samuel stood in the garden, their smiles wide, their eyes filled with wonder. But behind them, a shadow loomed, a figure with hollow eyes. The same figure that haunted the mirror. I confronted the mirror again, my breath fogging the glass. "What do you want?" I whispered. The children's laughter swirled around me, their voices overlapping. They were trapped, caught between life and death, waiting for redemption. The attic became my refuge. I lit candles, drawing symbols on the floor, ancient runes meant to bind spirits. The mirror pulsed, its surface rippling. I recited incantations, my voice shaky but determined. The laughter intensified, a storm of sound that threatened to tear me apart. And then, the mirror shattered. I stumbled back, shards of glass cutting my skin. The room filled with a blinding light, and I shielded my eyes. When I looked again, Evelyn and Samuel stood before me. Their eyes held gratitude, their lips forming silent words. They reached out, their fingers brushing mine. "Thank you," I whispered. But they weren't done. They led me to the garden, where the shadows still lingered. The figure from the photograph waited, its eyes hungry. Evelyn and Samuel stepped forward, their laughter now a song of release. The figure screamed, dissolving into mist. The garden blossomed, flowers bursting forth as if celebrating. Evelyn and Samuel embraced, their forms fading. They were free. But as they vanished, their laughter echoed one last time. It wasn't playful anymore. It was a warning, a promise. The mirror remained, its surface cracked but still pulsing. The children were gone, but their presence lingered. I left the house, never to return. The babysitter who complained about the laughter was replaced, and the children were forgotten. But I knew the truth. The house held memories, and sometimes, late at night, you could still hear their giggles, the sound of innocence twisted by darkness. And so, dear listener, beware the echoes in the hallway. For they may lead you to a mirror, a forgotten garden, and the laughter of lost souls. The end. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.